All right, so the how to develop countries has been an incredibly difficult thing, and multiple countries have done it multiple different ways over the years. Where it's saying international trade models, where you're looking at comparative advantage, where that is almost a self-sufficiency model, where countries are taking trying to do it on their own without international trade help. And where most cases, most countries are now using an international trade model that still doesn't really look at the social development piece, or in some cases, you're just really trying to do the economic side of things. And so in 2000, the UN set out a goal for the world. And you can see the 8 goals listed here of how to develop the world. That if we can do these things, the world would become a better place for everybody, essentially. And actually, they did get a lot of success on the big scale. Yeah, did they eradicate extreme poverty and hunger? No, they did not eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. But they did get a long ways with a lot of these. In some ways, they went backwards. Here is the report of their final findings. And what you're looking for is, okay, green is good progress. Yellow is okay progress. Red is they went backwards. And you can see, is it perfect? No, but there is a lot of green here. And so the decision was made by the UN that they had all these measurable goals from 2000 to 2015. Let's try again. So in 2015, they made the Sustainable Development Goals. And some of the goals are very similar, and some of them are some new ones, like industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Life below water is new. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. And what you were really looking for is, hey, how can we work to develop the world? Now, in geography speak, there are 2 models of how the world can become, or how individual places, some work on a country scale, some work on a larger scale. And so we're going to look at those 2 methods here of development. The first one was developed by W.W. Rostow, and he says linear is development. Once you reach a certain point, you're not going back. You're not going back. And we're going to look here at the different stages. I'm going to take myself off the screen. And what you're looking at here is, hey, basically what you're looking at here is in a traditional society, you are going to be limited. It is primary, is where you are, and you need to find a way out of this. You need to find a way out of this, and because everything is focused on the primary sector. You don't have a lot of growth. It's local, it's regional, it's in terms of social structure, it's going to be very traditional. And you need to have a change. And that change has to be initiated by the elites of the country. And the elites of the country are going to make those changes in stage 2, where you're going to start to see some improvement, especially in the infrastructure. And the technology pieces, it starts to go more widely. And then when you hit stage 3, you're in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, that your country is growing leaps and bounds. That secondary sector is growing. Now, you're going to start to have some pollution issues with that. But now, essentially, you're on the ground in that tradition. You're going really slow. And then you start to move a little forward faster and faster. And then you take off like an airplane. Okay? Or you can look at it this way, that in a country, hey, you're down here at the bottom, you're going to keep moving up. You're going to keep moving up. You're going to keep moving up. I don't really like this now line because I don't think it's very accurate. But, okay, by the Rostow model, everybody in the world could become developed. Because when you reach that fourth level, that drive to maturity, new industries, that multiplier effect of new jobs are getting created, and you're seeing more and more economic growth, and your economic growth is outpacing the population growth at this point. And by the time you reach stage 5, you're developed. You're in a high consumption level that more and more support the tertiary sector. Away from that, I think about this model often is hey, stage 1, you're in the primary sector. Stage 3, you're in the secondary sector. Stage 5, you're in the primary sector. And stage 2 and stage 4 are the transition zones between those. And in both cases, there's going to be some payoff or some drawbacks. Some people are going to get left behind in both stages, similar to deindustrialization here in this stage, that some people are going to get left behind, and it happens. And so while it's not all positive, so there are some criticisms of this model as well. First of all, you can only look at it at the scale of a country. You can't really look at it at any other scale. So it's a country as a whole. While international trade can help, it doesn't really look at that as a major factor when most places in the world are focusing on more and more international trade. The biggest part are encourages exploitation of LDCs. Some people would tell you it exploits racism within this because, okay, so export egg and raw materials. Well, if you're stuck there, if that's what you're good at, then that's what you probably should continue to do. And so this is a very much how the Americans and Europeans and the Japanese move forward in the Rostow model. Is it a perfect model? No, far from it. Does it have some good bits and pieces? Yes. It's far from perfect, though. Now, the other model that we're going to look at, definitely where the Rostow model focused on trade and tells you that development is linear. The second model we're going to look at is Wallerstein's, Immanuel Wallerstein's world systems theory. And this, so where in Rostow, the country is acting as an independent method. In Wallerstein's world systems theory, there's a core, a periphery, and a semi-periphery. So the core is obviously your most developed country, your semi-periphery is in the middle, and your periphery is on the bottom. And what this looks at is that all countries are dependent on each other, that the resources are going to flow from the periphery, and then get manufactured in the semi-periphery, and then the consumption of it will take place in the core country. So in other words, the neo-colonialism aspect that the countries who are at the periphery are still dependent on the countries in the core, and the countries in that semi-periphery are getting the resources from the periphery and then selling the products that they make to the core. There's a big part of this that's the international trade model, that the resources are flowing from the bottom of this scale to the top. What you're looking at here is, again, it is about sectors, where the primary sector is in the periphery, semi-periphery is your secondary, and the tertiary section is on top, is in the core. And with this, you can go backwards. You can go backwards, like the USSR, when it became Russia, actually went backwards. And so while this does focus on international trade, you can work, and you can go backwards in terms of development. Now, there's some, I want to show you the map of, is this a perfect map? No, and to be honest, like China here, it really depends on where you are in China. It would contend with you that the core of China being on the coast, and that the semi-periphery and the periphery, and I'm okay if you disagree with parts of this map, because that's good, because healthy disagreement's a positive thing. But a place like Nigeria, for instance, is it semi-periphery? It's the biggest economy in Africa, and it has a lot of stuff in the primary sector because of a large oil industry. Is that in the primary sector? I mean, is that bad for Nigeria to be in the primary sector when they're making economic growth because of it? Well, that's kind of up to you. According to Rostow, that wouldn't be that great, but I mean, that's where they're making their economic growth. And so they aren't really moving towards the post-industrial society for the most part. But what's next? Because one of the downfalls of Rostow is, if I go back to Rostow, what happens after stage 5? Does this mean you're fully developed and you will always be developed? Wow, that's amazing that the United States at this point be developed since the early 20s. There's no other rule of development? Okay, now Wallerstein doesn't really answer the how question, where Rostow does provide that. This one, the Wallerstein method, does focus on international trade. Perhaps the biggest benefit to the Wallerstein method, or the Wallerstein theory, as opposed to Rostow, is it works on multiple scales. Take Brazil, for instance. You can look here and you can see the core of the country, basically Sao Paulo and Brasilia, although that's a little bit of a misnomer because it's a complete capital. That was its purpose when built. And then you look here, I mean, that's the capital, and then you have all of these, the GDP national average kind of around it. There's your semi-periphery, and then your periphery is on the outskirts. Mexico is the same way. Mexico is probably even a better example because this is where all the maquiladoras are and all your manufacturing. So you're definitely a secondary sector here in that semi-periphery. And here's China, your core, your semi-periphery, and your periphery. That it really depends on I mean, that's one benefit of this, that basically all countries in the world have a core, a semi-periphery, and a periphery. But how does that help a country in terms of development? Great question. Great question. I mean, the other last two criticisms of this one is downplays the role of culture, of how culture plays a role in this. Really, both of them don't talk about this a lot, of how culture plays a role in development. And like that was getting to my point with Nigeria, where in Nigeria, even though it's in the primary sector and it's becoming more and more developed, but they're still in that sector, and you're not really growing a ton there, but you're not really growing into the tertiary sector, but your secondary sector and your primary sector are growing by leaps and bounds. Takeaways: you should be able to describe the basics of each of these models and theories, both their pros, their cons, and how they are flawed. Then also, you should know the Millennial Development Goals are explicitly in the AP outline. You need to know the 8 of them. The Sustainable Development Goals aren't, but you should know some of the new ones, because that will definitely, I would be surprised if the AP test at some point doesn't test it. You know a lot of them if you know the Millennial Development Goals, and then can just name a couple of the new ones, like Life Below Water or Innovation, Industry, and Infrastructure, which I said backwards, or Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions.